Good morning, Nicholas Ganina here. So I'm going to make a cookie. This time I'm going to throw in some more rye, and then I got actual grind up rye flour, and I'm going to throw in some rolled oats, not rolled oats, barley oats, and rye oats. And I'm going to throw some extra baking soda so I can have more leaven, and if I have to throw some lemon zest to counteract the butter on the baking soda, then so be it, but we'll see what happens. So I spaced about pulling out the butter yesterday, so I guess I'm going to have to cut these in smaller pieces so they break down quick enough. Alright, so we're getting some baking soda, just a little bit of it. Remember, it's going to give this really off taste to it, unfortunately. And then our baking powder, which has the citric acid to take away that flavor, that bad flavor. That's why I mentioned putting lemon zest or lemon juice to counteract that. And that should go a long way. Don't need that much, it's just 11, it's the yeast. And then since I forgot to bring up my butter room temp, the eggs are going to seize up the butter, and so when you're mixing this it'll look like you've ruined the recipe, but you just need to keep mixing until it starts breaking down, because there's friction going around with the KitchenAid.
As you see here, I'm adding my butter and sugar. This is called creaming method. Once this comes together, whips together and it becomes a full-on solid, then you can throw in your eggs. Since the butter wasn't fully warm, unfortunately, it's going to seize up the butter again because the eggs are chilled, which is no problem. It just means you're going to have to mix it longer. You'll notice right here. Now at this point, you can start throwing in your flour, whatever the flour you're going to use. Alright, it doesn't matter what flour you're going to use. If it's got enough gluten in it, no big deal. It's just the proteins holding it together. That's it. And if there's not enough protein, then you have to sub it out with another flour that has enough protein in it. Maybe it doesn't, like maybe high gluten flour, for example. I don't know. It just really depends. Now that you've picked it, you throw it in, like I picked rye because I don't want to use all-purpose flour anymore, because I want to be less processed and just make my own kind. Now at this point, you'll notice from this part where I'm picking out, customs. Just listen then.
Alright, so we've got Bing cherries now. Bing cherries, dried Bing cherries, sunflower seeds, and pecans. Just think of that as your custom. It can be whatever dry you want to have. But first, we need to double check that the recipe works, and then we'll throw those in there. Otherwise, you won't have the baking soda, baking powder mixing correctly. Same with the eggs, because it's going to intermix. So it's best to figure out the recipe first.
So what I'm just really going over is that you pick custom ingredients, whatever you feel like. Any kind of dry fruits, any kind of nuts. It doesn't really matter. You're creating your own recipe, your own thing. That's really what I'm just going over here.
Ooh, we'll see how this works out. It's a little wet, but we'll cook it off. If it needs more rye flour, yeah, I'm starting to see a little of the fat separate, so yeah, we're gonna have to throw a little more rye flour in there. But yeah, see what I mean? There. Can you see that? I know it's a little hard to see the texture, but it's really shiny, and you don't want it to be shiny.
But before you even think about doing that sort of stuff, test out the cookie first.
It's turning out.
Alright? Or whatever you're making, and you put it into the oven and see if it comes completely flat because there's too much butter, or maybe it's too dry and it starts crackling, like I mentioned in this part.
So as I was saying, it gets a crackling effect when it's dry, and that's what's happening right here. So to counteract that is you add some milk. There's nothing wrong with it. It'll taste just as fine, but if you want a little more moist, you throw a little more milk, liquid, or whatever it is you're going to use.
Now, as I mentioned that part, as you notice, you can add, milk, It doesn't matter what kind of liquid you use, as long as you add a liquid to counteract that dryness. That's all you're doing, right? It can be milk, it can be water, it can be like beer. It doesn't even really matter. I'm serious. Maybe not beer, because it'll be a leavener as well. It'll make it rise a little bit. Just saying. Actually, it would still be good. But the fact of the matter is, if you want it to rise a little more, if it wasn't enough, it wasn't soft enough, throw more butter in there if you must. But be diligent, because if you throw too much...
Alright, see how this works. So here's the cookie. Oh, it's not that bad. I think it needs... Oh, look at the chocolate.
That's cool.
I think it needs... milk.
It's a little crumbly. Just a little bit.
More baking powder to make it rise. Rising, which is amazing because of just the lower temperature is allowing it to get a little through. So check this out. The cookies and the textures are amazing. Now we just gotta remember, always check the bottom. That's how you tell. It might look light on the top, but it's the bottom that's what's telling you it's cooked. Let's keep that in mind. So you notice how it turned out? Turned out really nicely. I added a little more milk to it, and I added more baking powder to it to rise a little more, to make it a little softer. And it turned out. It's pretty cool. But I hope you realize that making cookies are very easy. You don't need to follow recipes. You just need to understand the methods and what's going on in the chemistry.